Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Verista BioBytes, your source for educational and informative content on various subjects in the life science industry. My name is Najjar, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Verista. And in this episode of Verista BioBytes, we are here with Kammeraad, Senior Consultant, to talk about why change management is so hard and how to overcome some of the barriers. Kelly has extensive experience working with clients on transformation initiatives, and we are very excited to get her thoughts on the subject matter. So Kelly, thank you for being here today. We're thrilled to be speaking with you. Can you just tell everybody about your role at Verista?
Sure. Hello, everyone. As Sue mentioned, I'm a senior consultant here at Verista, and my roles have spanned actually several areas, mainly digital transformations, and that can be getting people ready for the technology, and obviously change management. It's that people and process piece of the technology triad that I mainly get involved in here.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kelly. So since today's topic is change management, a subject you are passionate about, tell us about what it is and why it can be so hard at organizations.
Well, change, I guess, to back up, to bring the person into this discussion right from the start, humans just don't do well with change. We're actually kind of hardwired not to. And there's some of that hardwiring that most people are unaware of when they come to work. And when you get involved in a change initiative in a company, and you have some of that unawareness about how you personally, and this is true for leaders as well as people who are actually doing the work or anywhere within the organization, it's difficult. And if you look at the data, and I think there's threads of this reality in many of the data sets that are available in the current state about the failure rates for change initiatives. There's a thread in all of those studies of this piece. It may not be completely and honestly addressed, because I think in some cases it's still a bit subconscious. It's a little bit under the surface. If you ask 5 executives to name the critical factor, you're going to get different answers. And if you start talking with managers or the people who are actually leading their teams, or who are the folks who are rolling up their sleeves and are involved in this, their focus and their reasons for failure land in different places. And when you start to peel that back, and the studies have, they realize that managers are looking at these initiatives from their own viewpoint. And we know that we see things as we are versus as things are. We often, without having awareness of those narratives that are running in our minds, will bring a lens, right? And we view the world through those lenses. And that's true when people in their personal lives, but it's true for us when we come into work as well. And so if we're a little bit overwhelmed in our personal lives and coming into an organization, as many of the organizations are in the current state, especially with digital transformations, there's a lot going on. There are a lot of changes happening. And so, right, that dissonance, there's stepping into this, those ripple effects of the change, if you will, are really difficult for people to stand still in.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, change is inevitable, like you said, in life and in work, right? And we all have different experiences and deal with it differently. It makes a lot of sense to see how that can impact some of these change initiatives that you're leading, right? So could you speak to the different types of change organizations can have?
Sure. Changes are typically, it's going to be some sort of a transformational change. It could be the changes because of a merger or an acquisition. There could be changes in leadership. There could be, for an individual or a team, changes in their direct line or changes upstream. We lived through with a pandemic, obviously foisted really overnight a lot of change on companies. So that was change that companies and people needed to absorb on top of all the other things that were already going on for them. So change can look like a lot of things, but when you really, as a person, in the company, when you step back from that, it isn't really, it doesn't really matter what's driving the change. That's those same set of things that are going on subconsciously in humans that impact the success rate of these initiatives.
Yeah. And I mean, so many people can relate to these types of changes, right? And I know
Sure.
you have a lot of experience in all of them, especially when it comes to transformational initiatives. Yeah.
Sure. And I think for, those of us who've had I'm going to call it a luxury and an honor to work in and out of many different companies and help them to manage through these changes or onboard new technology or emerge, right? Companies that are purchasing or blending other organizations. It's when you get a different perspective over time and you can see there's commonalities and the types of opportunities, if you will, challenges that companies face because of that. And I think it's given me this perspective has been honed over the years. And there's a body, I did a recent, just a Google search, actually, in putting together a larger presentation on this topic. And there were almost 6,000 articles, and most of them were peer reviewed, that are out there around change management and mindfulness, and around a little bit of a different perspective on change than I know I was given, when I first started my career, and even just, up until just a few years ago.
Yeah. And so from your perspective, and I know you have some great stats that really shocked me when I looked at them, why is change so difficult for organizations? And, I mean, it's so amazing, some of these statistics you share. I'd love to get your thoughts on your perspective on why it's so difficult.
It is difficult. And this is, more than 60% of the enterprise transformations are unsuccessful. I got that from McKinsey. And I know Harvard Business Review. There are many other groups. I think Deloitte has also done some studies around this, and the numbers tend to be 60% or higher. So it's shocking. And you step back and you think about the resource strain, right? Only to have that percentage of an initiative to fail. And when you look to the 62% of employees don't like leaving their comfort zone, and the 40% of the frontline managers who don't understand why it's happening, you start to realize that there's really more going on here than just an initiative of change. This starts to get into that human piece, that the people piece, that process and technology triangle that really needs to be considered in any change initiative. And I asked myself the same thing. 62% of people don't like leaving their comfort zone. I know on the change initiatives that I've had responsibility to drive or been taken a part in over the years, I could substantiate that very easily. And I know I've had people tell me directly, that they don't like change, or that they don't understand, and this is starting to get into the frontline managers as well. Why are we doing this again? We just did this. There's a whole lot of types of narratives that you're going to hear from people. And really, when you hear what they're saying is this dissonance, this is just this overwhelm of change. They're really kind of maxed out with their ability to change, and that contributes to the uptake or the transformation, I believe, being unsuccessful. And I know, this threads the needle for the rest of the discussion around what can you do? What can companies do to be able to increase the likelihood that these change initiatives are going to be successful? And a lot of that really comes down to mindfulness. It comes down.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Right. And leaders so there's a lot of training. There are many organizations that are out there that are doing these types of awareness sessions with senior leadership. And so that the awareness of how to lead through an organization with this type of an understanding is coming. And I think it's important to begin to think about ways that this type of knowledge can be drilled down to those who are all through a company, so we can
Yeah.
begin to understand what it is within our own selves, within our person, within the way that we're wired, that it isn't something about us that's wrong, or that there's something about us as people that's faulty, but it's really the way it gets back. It's the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems, and it's really the way that we're wired. And human beings are wired, that fight or flight response that gets queued up in the body. And these are biochemical responses that get triggered based on emotion. And so if there's dislike or aversion to change, that biochemical soup is changing. And the studies are showing when this sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, gets cued off in a person, and this is true for everybody, until you start to learn ways to mitigate this in our bodies, it's literally impossible for our frontal lobes to engage into critical or higher level thinking where we're in that place, because the body is preparing to run away from a lion. It's preparing to run away from some threat that's perceived to be dangerous to the human. And none of this is really, it's all under the awareness of most people. But the good news is these are techniques that can be taught. Even having discussions about this and helping people understand when they're feeling that hey, when you're in that state, when you feel that highly aroused state coming, and when your heart's racing, it's not, you can't think critically, literally.
No. Yeah, and it's disruptive to
it is
transformation,
disruptive.
right?
It
And
is.
everyone's responding differently.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's, and that kind of behavior, that sense when a person is in that state, because we humans evolved to be collaborative, other people play off that. So that's why it's important to bring that awareness, because if you've got a calming effect going on, on a team, that can be, as I'm going to use the word contagious, but that can have as much of an impact to have someone who's mindful and kind of grounded as somebody who's really afraid or vocal or averse, and they're out there having a lot of reaction to the change that's coming, that can impact people in a less than positive way, especially on a team, right? If a team is challenged with making these changes, as a person leading that team through that change, it's difficult to try to manage those individuals who are in that state. So if you bring to bear techniques to teach people how to manage this themselves, you not only contribute to the overall success of change initiatives in the company, you've also enabled people on your team to be more successful, just honestly, in life.
Yeah. Well, I've not, it's interesting how you talk about these three prongs, right? The technology and the process. Our clients and us as individuals do really well at work, but it's this third element that we forget when there's a transformation project going on or initiative, how everybody reacts differently, and how our history um, kind of takes a play in all of this, and how disruptive it can be to these initiatives, and not having them pan out properly and successfully, which is what you're talking about. And I think most organizations don't give it that thought, right? What you're sharing with us is, a different perspective, um, which is, fascinating, and I think important for people to realize it's comes from within, and each person, as leaders, we need to have this awareness and provide people with, mindfulness or whatever it is that I think some of these suggestions you have is super important. So yeah,
But look,
really.
there are elite military teams, the SEALs, and Rangers and others, where they're teaching, and these are techniques that can be taught. There's some breathing exercises and just discussing and bringing this concept of how the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems work within humans. And then if you take that model and overlay that over a company and think about, really, if you think about the parasympathetic nervous system, when it's engaged, has sort of a governing function over the sympathetic. It can help to manage that fight or flight. And it's the same thing in a company. I believe it was McKinsey had actually done an overlay of in an organization and those governing functions and how they work very much like these two systems within the human body.
Yeah.
And so when you step back and think about the individual within the corporate, with it from a governance perspective, and knowing that good governance comes from planning, it comes from having thought about this, right? And you set up how you're going to manage and monitor the frameworks, those kinds of things. It's possible, and many companies are beginning to go down this path to teach the individual these techniques as well. Look, if it works for these elite military units who are going, their lives, everything that they do is the high stress. They need to be, they don't right first time, right? There's no margin for error in many cases, and they need to be in command of what they're doing. And they're getting dropped into these situations that are dark. They don't know what is going to be around the next corner, literally, but because they're in that space where they're able to navigate that, they're successful regardless of what you put them into. And that's true within corporate change initiatives as well. If people begin to understand that they can get some mastery over themselves, over that complete and in many cases, very visceral response to change, that when people begin to become aware of that, we allow for them to be successful to navigate the change at work, but also to become more successful in life.
Right. Right. And you know, I guess change can be frustrating, right? And it can take a toll on employees. You know, maybe you could tell the audience, give your advice on how organizations, leaders, and employees and individuals themselves can see greater success when implementing transformation initiatives.
I think it's important just to recognize that there are a lot of things going at play when it comes to a change initiative, and that it's really important to take into consideration each individual's response to that, and that is taken as a whole, it has an impact, right? The people piece of this is so important that it needs to be considered, and even discussing going into a change initiative and being transparent about and seeking more information and input about, hey, we know change is hard. Let's talk this through. Right, begin to plan for a successful execution in that initiative by being candid about what everybody has on their plates and talking about some of these types of techniques that can be brought to bear to be more successful. And in many cases, it's just being aware of that. It's just being aware that, hey, you can color your day by walking into the room and having this really kind of dark narrative going in your mind about this change, right? And that isn't asking everybody to do the unicorns and the glitter and all of those things. It's right, but it's just to be aware that that narrative, we, again, back to the concept of we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And when we bring that type of a narrative and we're exhausted or already overwhelmed in change or feeling like we're just completely unable to be successful because there's so many changes going on. If it's possible to bring that out, talk about that and plan for it, I think companies are going to take a nice solid step forward in asking themselves and their employees, what can we do about this? How can we plan for the people piece of this? And what are steps that we can take to help people to become part of the change agent group in a company, right? Start small, train a few people, expect some train the trainer types of activities, decide what's going to work in the corporate culture and begin to initiate that.
Yeah. This has been so wonderful, Kelly. I mean, I can't thank you enough. I think we, like I said, we're sometimes in the weeds of the technology and the process. We don't take a step back. And this is really critical for the work we do, but anyone does, in making sure that we kind of look at this. So thank you for your time and your insights on this important topic of change management and making transformational initiatives more successful. You know, so thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
It. Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, well, and let me, before I sign off, I want to thank Kelly for your time. If you've been listening in, thank you for your time. And we welcome you to tune in to more editions of Verista BioBytes at verista.com/insights. And we hope you have a wonderful day.